Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's a Wednesday, so we are live here from Inkarnate Town to do our usual per Wednesday or Hump Day stream. Today, we're going to be covering campsites, and we're going to be using the fantasy battle map style to do that. Campsites are an invaluable asset in a DM's or GM's repertoire. They can be used for so many great things. They're absolutely fantastic. A lot of campaigns start in campsites. They're a great place for DMs, for players to introduce each other. You can do great for pushing the narrative along in the plot. They're great for players to sit down and rest and talk about different types of going over clues and plans and getting to know each other. And they also work great as battle maps. They're great encounter maps. So that's absolutely fantastic with that. So we'll go ahead and get started. And we're going to use the fantasy battle map style. So we'll create a new map, fantasy battle maps. As I always say, please use 2 or 3K if you have a lower end machine. Use 4K if you have a higher end. Let's go ahead and use landscape. We're going to create new map. Now in the chat, I've just pinned a little question in there about, hey, where should we be putting what kind of terrain are we going to be creating our campsite on? And one, we can do like a tree clearing, which is pretty basic. We can do waterfall ruins, number 2, or we can do ruins, or I'm not, sorry, not ruins, but a hollowed out tree, number 3. So please let me know which of those 3 options that you like best. Just put 1, 2, or 3 in that chat. Yeah, I like the waterfall idea as well, first time chatter and Delurian. Yeah, that's a great location. We'll let other people weigh in on that question. In the meantime, let's just start us off with scale first. And normally what I'll do is I'll just stick with either the 40 or I'll drop it down by half and make it 20 by 15. This makes it so where the battle map is not massive, and that way I don't have to scale down the scales or the stamps and make them so small. So this way we can kind of make a medium-sized map. It has plenty of room for players to maneuver around. And the aspect ratio works great. We got vote for number 3 in a hollow out tree. Hey, first time chatters, a lot of them here. Yeah, just let me know which one sounds the best to you, 1, 2, or 3. Right now, number 3 is working. That's great. All right. I'm going to quickly just save that while people keep weighing in. I'm going to call it campsite. So the reason why I'm having you guys kind of choose the location is I just want to really stress the importance of what makes a really compelling campsite is location, location, location. Okay? That's what makes a great campsite. Campsites are kind of bare bones. They don't have much more than like the fire pit, some logs sitting around the camp, or your tents or bed rolls. There's not much to the actual campsite part, right? Where at least the elements you see in a campsite, it's the terrain, right? That's why people go out, when they go out camping, they go to see the beautiful nature and the terrain. So that's going to play an important role in your campsite. And so I think we're looking at number 3 as being the option inside of a hollowed out tree. I'll give it maybe another minute or so for let people to kind of weigh in and just kind of figure out what exactly they want to do. But right now, 3 is kind of trailing. It's kind of winning. Sorry, not trailing. Winning. So I think we're going to go with number 3. So what we'll first do is let's stick with the number 1 terrain piece is inside of a hollowed out tree. Since everyone has chosen 3, we'll do that. So we want to pick that tree. We'll go in the catalog, pick tree. And there's these hollowed out trees in Elven Homes pack. So just go and click that. It's going to take a moment for the art to load. We'll kind of pick which one we feel works the best. I kind of feel one with an opening kind of makes the most sense unless you want it to be a hidden campsite. So like maybe there's a trap door or a tunnel that leads inside of it. But for now, we'll go with open. I kind of like that. So we'll go with open. We're not going to place it perfectly center. I will mention that centering something perfectly in the center doesn't always look great. It's always nice to off-center it just a little bit. Like it can be central, but not perfectly in the center. So moving it a little off to the side is always a nice idea. What I might also consider doing is I might want to make it, since it's a dead tree, to show that it's dead, I could remove all the color from it, desaturate it, and make it white. Those kind of trees are called snags or ghost snags, right? The tree is dead, but it's lost all of its fluid, right? It's lost all its water, and so it dries out and it turns white. So we'll select it, go to advanced settings. We're going to desaturate it. I'm really going to boost the brightness. I want to show that it's a ghost snag. There we go. So we have this nice white thing. I'll boost the size up a little bit, and let's look about how wide it is. You got to make sure that there's enough room for the bedrolls and stuff. Let's just grab a bedroll and kind of see what we're working with here. So this bedroll looks about right. It's about 7 feet. So I think that's about the right size. So I can scale this down a little bit. Let's make sure there's enough room. Let me put a bunch of them in here just to see how much space there is. I think there's enough for 5. I think that looks about right. So cool, let's go with that. So that step is done. Great. Okay, so we know we got the scale down. The bedrolls are about the right size, and there's enough room within there to fit the kind of equipment that we need. I might even scale up just a tad bit more because I also want to put like a fire pit in there and what are there other options that I might want to put in. So let's move it over to the side here. So let's add in the terrain part. What I like to do after I've put on the main centerpiece, which is the hollowed out tree, the campsite's going to be the centerpiece, is I'll create a path in the forest or wherever we're at. So I'll go ahead and use the line tool, and I will select just a solid line, turn the shadow off, and let's create a path that bends around the tree. So the path kind of starts here, and then it bends around, and then it goes off this way. So that's going to be like a path. And then from there, we can kind of take cliffs and different types of stamps with the line tool and kind of create a way of framing the path, as well as putting some lift and elevation up to the tree. Because what I want to show is elevation with that tree. I want to show that it's higher up, the path is lower down. So we'll do that. First, I'll kind of rotate this a little bit more over to here. I'll take the path. Again, I'm going to select this, and I'm going to choose one that's going to work best for a cliff. You know what I really like is the jungle asset. So if you go to Jungle Tropics, there's this nice single rocky water bank. Though there isn't water on it, you can use it as just a cliff, and it works really, really well. We're going to go ahead and use the pen, and we're going to create a little cliff that's going to frame the path. There we go. First step right there. Okay. Let's make sure there's enough room for the path. So I might rotate it a little bit more. Let's push it this way. I want to make sure there's plenty of room for the next path that I want to put down. So let's put down the next path. Let's make sure there's this stump is just kind of sitting on this edge like this. There we go. Now, you know what? Let's fix that. Let's do it again. I want to make it to where the path isn't perfectly even between two sides, but it's thin enough. Because what I want to do is I want to create a bottleneck effect. If your players decide to engage in combat on the path, there'll be limited single file combat. That's why, creating multiple levels that players can walk on and everything makes it more adventurous, more interesting. Let's create some more terrain to show the height differential. So I'll go over to the shape tool. I'll keep the stroke that I have, but I'll use the brush, and then we're going to create a path that's going to be just right underneath this stump. The stump is just kind of resting on this next elevation bit. Fill the whole thing in. There we go. It looks like we're going to have to flip it because it looks like it's going downward. So we just flip it. Oopsie, wrong one. There we go. Like that. Perfect. And we might want to scale down just a little bit. And let's bring the stamp stroke up just a little bit. It isn't going a little higher up in elevation, so it kind of makes sense to show that there's some differential by boosting the stamp scale. And the more and more cliffs that you create, continue to boost that up. The path is somewhat recessed like a gully, not entirely. Okay, let's go ahead and put that there. That looks good. Let's go ahead now and just texture in certain areas. Let's take some grass and we'll fill in all the areas where those little cliffs at. Let's use this dark moss. I think this will work just fine. And don't worry about bleeding outside of the lines or anything like that, because this is just the base texturing that I want to put down. we're going to end up using a lot more textures. It's just that you usually put down some kind of base texture that you can differentiate between what each thing is, right? Where's what texture, base texture for the path? What's the base texture for the cliffs? What's the base texture for the water? So that's where you kind of start with, is these base textures. From there, we might want to consider adding on more to the tree. I feel like the tree is just kind of bare. I feel like roots would be coming out and kind of branching and somewhat covering the tree so players can crawl underneath or on top of all that stuff. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and throw down root. You know, there's some really nice trees in the hell style, in the hell pack. I think it's hell terrain. Oopsie, I've still got bed in there. And I think, let's take a look here. Yeah, there is some nice logs and kind of stuff right here. These work really well. We're not going to worry about adding object shadows. We'll worry about shadows once we determine where the light source is. We just do one step at a time. And we'll make more sense of the cliff or the gully or whatever it is you want to call it, of the path that the players are going to walk on. We'll get more to that later. Just one step at a time. Let's just start populating the map with stamps, and then we'll start adjusting each cliff to fit to what height differential we need, because we'll end up using shadows to show height. Cliffs can be a foot high, or a cliff could be like a ledge, or a cliff could be 30 feet high or 100 feet high, 10 feet high, right? It varies. So the way to show that height is by using shadows. But we're not going to do that yet. Let's focus first on continuing adding more, populating the map with stamps, and then we can kind of move to that next step. Let's fill in that spot I missed right there. I'm going to go back to this. I also want these to look like ghost snags, and I like the white because it also contrasts against the darker green, so they really pop out. We'll be throwing in more browns and other things like that in a moment. Let's desaturate, bring the brightness up, and let's bring the contrast down just a little bit so it'll be a little bit brighter. Some great things to do is add obstacles on the path. Like if you put this right here and have it aimed, what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to have some of these things kind of pointing inward. All of these stumps and logs are going to be pointing inward towards that tree, towards the campsite. But I'll be throwing down other stamps as well that won't be pointing it, so it won't look all like everything is just pointing in the same direction. Here's one of those nice ones right here. I like this one. This looks good. Putting that maybe on there might be good, or putting it over here. Or it could be off to the side right here to kind of block. Players might have to take the path to get around to the opening part. This might be blocked off. So it might not be a bad idea to do that. Put another one over here. This will block the path. So if they do want to get to the entrance to the campsite, they do have to go all the way around. We'll get to shadows and everything else shortly. Let's go add in roots. Actually, I think the root is in a sewer pack, but we'll type in root. There we go, sewer roots. And to stick with that color palette, white, bring the saturation up. No shadow for now. We'll add shadows later. I'm going to contrast a little bit. That dark shadow at the base of the root looks a little odd. So we'll place one here. Oh, I like this one. This one looks nice. Place that there. Okay, place this one here. Have it kind of like wrapping around that log right there. I think that looks kind of cool. There we go. All right. Let's put in a texture where we want the campsite to be. I think it would be kind of nice to make it look like, because there's all this nature, it would be nice to have a contrast between nature and a structure that's been made by creatures. So adding in stone floor that looks like it's been put in by people will contrast against all the nature that we have right now. So let's end up doing that. I kind of like this. I'm a big fan of this texture right here. I think this is really nice. We'll go with color. We're going to desaturate just a little bit. We'll bring the brightness down, and let's bring the size down just a little bit as well. For now, I'll just fill it in with the texture, but we'll end up doing a lot of blending later. Let's also choose a texture for the path. Again, jungle has some great stuff for that. This brown texture right here works really well. We'll end up using a lighter texture as well. For now, we'll just use this brown texture. Again, don't worry about if it bleeds off. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Where are we at for changes? 51. Now we can keep going. So far, we're doing okay. Let's go throw in some cliff or very small cliffs that will look like they're steps, but they're not necessarily cliffs with a lot of height. So what I'll end up doing is going back to the path tool, the shape tool, line tool, sorry, go through 3 different tools there. And then I'll change the blend mode to luminosity. And I want to create this illusion of height. So what I'll do is I'll draw the path first. I want it to be below, and I want to change the scale. There we go, that looks good. And let's push it down a layer. And then what we'll do is we'll use a series of these to create this illusion of like natural steps that go down. So we'll go ahead and add another one here, another one here, another one here. And don't make them perfect straight lines, right? Make them a little curve so that it kind of looks like they're natural. If you have them perfectly straight, then they're not going to look so natural. So just continue to make those nice curves. You can also put some really close together. That would also create this illusion of natural, because if you have them equally spaced apart as I have them now, what's going to end up happening is they're not going to look natural, right? So I want to make sure that I don't have them perfectly spaced. Add in 2, 3 in one location if you need to. This will give it a little bit more of a natural feel to it. Let's just keep adding these steps in here. That looks good. Let's add another one here. All right. People always are asking, like, how do I create multiple levels, like within a cavern or on a path or a trail or whatever? And this is really my method of doing that. It's just creating these much smaller cliffs. And then you can see already that it already gives this illusion that there are these layers. And what we'll end up doing also is we'll using shadowing as well, using the top layer and some color with shadows to make it look like some parts will be deeper and some will be shallower within that trail area. Because people were asking earlier, like, well, how do I know what the height differential and stuff is? Don't worry, we're going to get all to that later. At 72 changes, we'll save, we'll keep going. I was sort of looking forward to the waterfall one, but I'll have to make a waterfall camp in another stream. But I also do love hollowed out trees. California redwood have beautiful hollowed out massive trees, absolutely huge, these massive redwoods. And so, you know, get a lot of inspiration from something like that from here. Let's see here. Now, not every one, I'm going to have it to where not every log is going to be a ghost. So we'll change this back up. And I think this will also contrast well against the white, because brown and green just go so well together. It just looks weird when everything is white. Okay. All right. Players can jump over this thing, I guess, if they wanted to get over here, but then they would be kind of at a disadvantage. Okay, let's move this. Doesn't really fit on there perfectly well. Sometimes it's hard to kind of mesh these things together. Okay. Let's continue adding some more height stuff. And so what we'll end up using now is using the larger one, these jungle cliffs. These are bigger, as you can see, and so they'll work well to show the more higher points. You're starting to see some extra height there. That's good. Let's show some height here as well. There we go. Yeah, it could be. I was also thinking that this could be a dried out riverbed or creek bed, and we could throw in some pebbles and rocks in certain areas, and that would give it that illusion that it's a dried out creek. We can put some rocks in some areas, other areas can be kind of more dirt where the rocks will push down the stream. So we can show all of that in here. But yeah, it does look very much like the bend of a river. And you'll notice that when you go hiking, trails are very similar to that way, right? Trails kind of meander and bend through the landscape, following the terrain as they go. All right, let's remove that line because it just looks weird. And we can just kind of keep pressing forward as we continue to add more to it. So we've kind of put those higher, we put these bigger cliffs on. So those are gonna, what we want to do with those bigger cliffs, that's where we'll be shading our shadows to be a little bit darker. So that way that part will pop out more. So that will be important. Okay, let's keep going. There is, let's just keep adding more wood pieces that kind of point inward towards that tree. And let's throw in one as well where you can actually get into the fort, get into the camp by going up this log right here. That would create another sense of like surprise. So, but not every person who would think that enemies would go up this log or would think, hey, this would lead into a campsite. But throwing in something that goes on top of the hollowed out stump will also give another sense of depth. I mean, I've mentioned this in the past, but a big trick to depth is overlapping your stamps. The more and more stamps you overlap, you're beginning to create this sense of illusion. Overlap, creating depth. You absolutely need to overlap stamps if you want to create that illusion. Okay, let's just keep adding in more. Let's add another one. I think right here should look good. Okay. I'm not sure this is the best place for this one. Wondering if I should move it over here. I do want to make sure that it's blocked off. That's for sure needs to happen. So I can kind of create some more over here as well. Let's see here. I think this one might do well right here. In this corner. You see, notice that they're all kind of pointing inward towards there. Okay, let's turn off that grid now. We've got the idea about pretty much where everything's going to be now. So we can start throwing in some details inside of the campsite, like all of the camp stuff. We can turn that grid back on real quick just to make sure that I got the beds the right size, of course. There we go. That looks about right. We'll push it down a layer. We'll put one right up against one. I'm going to use the ones that have all the equipment on it. Like this one right here looks like a paladin of some kind. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. And it's okay to have it go underneath a little bit of the stump stamp, because what's happening is that, you know, it might branch out at the bottom. And so as it goes up, it tapers inward. So you would see some overlap, just a little bit. Let's just grab, oh, this looks like some kind of alchemist or maybe an artificer or a wizard's bed. Let's see, we got a barbarian's bed here. Great, let's put that over here. What do we got? 4. Let's add in one more bed roll. Okay. Okay, let's just throw in a regular bedroll. And let's have it kind of disheveled a little bit. Let me make sure that it's about relatively the same scale. Perfect. Let's put a centerpiece within the camp. Just type in camp and all related stuff will pop up. So you'll see here. That's kind of nice. Let's throw in maybe a fire pit. People might be cooking something, and also it creates a light source. So we have this nice light source, and then that will kind of help us to decide how to deal with shadows within the stump. But we'll also have to factor in light sources, natural light sources, like is it nighttime? So do we need to create moonlight? And then how is the stamps going to interact with the moonlight? So we'll add that too. Let's make sure this thing isn't too huge. This thing looks a little massive. It's about 5 feet wide. We can probably bring it down a little bit more. That looks good. Great. Let's add like a stack of wood. That might not be a bad idea. We've got room over here for it. So let's throw in a stack of wood. What else would be good? Well, yeah, let's throw in like a water. Because this bed right here doesn't have its own details on it. Let's create our own. Let's get an instrument in there. I think maybe a bard's bed would be nice. So let's put that over there. There we go. Now that I've got the scale down a little bit more because I have those bed rolls down, I can turn off the grid. Okay. Looks good so far? Yeah, I'm digging it. Let's also put in maybe a tool like an axe. Like that wood had to be chopped, right? So let's throw in an axe. Only makes sense. There we go. Looks good. What about places to sit around the campfire? Maybe we should look up some logs. Let's make the log wood darker, then lighter. It should pop out a little bit more. There's one there, one here. Don't make them perfectly aligned with each other. Just create some space. There we go. Let's move these a little bit inward. And I want some space. I don't want all the logs going perfectly around it, because then people have to like get around it to get to the campfire where the food is and stuff. So we'll create a little opening so people can kind of get to the fire without having to move the logs. You can always push them farther back if you think it's too close to each other. You'll make that decision as you go. Okay, let's keep adding more things to camp. Let's type in camp again. Let's see here. Oh yeah, let's put some equipment or utensils next to the campfire. That kind of makes sense, right? You notice that there's a pot there on the campfire. So let's go ahead and put down some utensils. Makes sense to have that next to the fire, right? Okay. Let's keep adding to it. Okay. You don't have to have the map be as pretty as possible. What's more important than being pretty is functionality. Being pretty is how much you want to be artistic about it. So that's a decision that you need to make. From what I understand by most DMs and GMs, time is strapped pretty hard. So not every DM has the time to make a absolutely gorgeous map. So if you're running a campaign and you're very busy making battle maps of your own without having to clone and edit other people's, then you're probably going to want to focus more on functionality than on art. If you're a map maker and you do that for a living, then yeah, I would focus then on both the art and functionality, because both are important. DMs don't just want a pretty map, they also want it to be functional. They want their players to be able to use it. Otherwise, it just becomes art and not functional. So always important to think about functionality as well as making it pretty. If it's just pretty, then what good is it to a DM, right? It's just art, and there's nothing wrong with it just being art, but the functionality is kind of important when you're making a battle map, right? Because it's the most used type of map when you're doing a tabletop RPG, right? Because it's where encounters take place. It's where players gain experience to boost their levels and their skills. So it's always important. Okay, let's take a step back and look at it. Usually after making several hundred changes or so, I've saved it a couple times, I always zoom out for a moment, and that way I can get an overall feel for the map. If you start working on something, you kind of lose track of the overall picture, and then you might not end up liking what you did, and you end up deleting it. So taking a step out, zooming out, and taking in the bigger picture helps you to kind of figure out the direction that it's going in and the direction that you want to keep it going in, or if you want to change direction. It's always nice to zoom out. It's something that professional artists do when they're doing their art too. They always zoom out a little bit to take a bigger look at the bigger picture. Okay, overall, I'm happy with the way it's going. There's some things that look kind of weird, but we'll end up making some changes to that. One thing that I would kind of expect with all the green that I see here is vegetation, and I'm not seeing a lot of vegetation. So let's go ahead and add that in. Great pack for this, Jungle Tropics. And you're going to see a whole just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful plants here. And what I'll do is I'll probably pick several. Usually when you see like a jungle setting, or if you're in like a deciduous forest or a coniferous forest or whatever kind of forest you're in, there's a lot of interesting dense vegetation at the base below the canopy. And so we really want to show that here by adding in a bunch of plants. And what's really cool is that the great place to start is to start by kind of overlapping the cliff and the trail. And what that will do is kind of create, again, this sense of depth and height. So as I kind of place these down, you kind of notice that it kind of hides a little bit of that perfect straight edge. There's nothing overlapping it, and it looks kind of odd. And so adding in these along the edge here will create that excellent sense of depth. And I'm not going to place them everywhere. It covers the whole thing. Remember, I want a diversity of plant life, so I'll make sure to place them kind to where they're dominant. You can see them in the map, but they're not the only plant there. I like these ones. They're kind of spiky, and they kind of pop out over the edge of the trail really well. So I kind of like that. Those work well. Let's go and throw in another one. There's this nice, really beautiful green that I like right here. Let's have these all be in like maybe just one area instead of all over the map, just to kind of show that, hey, maybe they proliferate better in this kind of area. And so I'll put a whole bunch just right here in this ledge, right here. And then maybe just a couple more. So I'm just going to isolate this beautiful green plant into one area. Maybe even put some on the other side there, just so that it doesn't look like it's all just perfect on one side. That looks good. Let's go add in another one. One thing we have is a lot of green. You know what goes really well with green? Red. So throw in some red plants as well. This has a little bit of pink or a little bit of red in it. So let's throw that in here. Let's put it, let's kind of scatter them around. They're going to pop out more than the other stamps because they have such a different color to it, that red, while the first two stamps we used were green. So if you put too many down, it becomes overwhelming, and then it looks like it's kind of the dominant color. So instead, just kind of place them here and there, because again, they pop out so well. Let's put some here. I like that color. One there, one here, and one here. There we go. I think that overall looks good. I like these plants here. Ooh, this beautiful green right here. Oh, I like this large bush too. That looks nice. Let's put this large bush all the way up against the tree right here, making it even harder for players to kind of navigate to get to this spot. And so it becomes very difficult now for them to get over to this area. And it also kind of creates this beautiful lighter green color. And I like that so much, I'll probably add that in other spots too. So let's go put some in this corner here. One there looks good, one here. Yeah, I really like this quite a bit. Adds a nice color to it. There we go. Let's put one on this side as well. There we go. Looking good, right? Let's go ahead and save that real quick. And then we'll kind of figure out where we're going to move from there. We've added in a lot of plants. So what might be nice to do is maybe focus a little more on the path this time. And, you know, a great way to make a path look like it's been trodden is to use this trick of contrast between light dirt and dark dirt. And so the way that we'll do is we already have this kind of darker, somewhat medium-sized brown here. So we'll use up using a lighter color to make it look like there's these treads, scuffs, things like that. And you know, a great texture that I love to use is dry grass. It's in an orc pack, but it works absolutely fantastic. You'll have to scale down a little bit to make sure that you can get as much of the artifacts as possible. And whenever you're blending a texture on top of another texture, especially if you're kind of blending a lot, bring down the opacity to around 30% or so. And what we'll do is we'll just start putting some of this dry grass in some of these sections. And you're going to notice that it contrasts against that darker brown underneath it. And it's going to give it that nice kind of grungy feel to it, giving it a sense of layeredness that I like so much. There we go. Yeah, get that lighter color in there. Yes, much better. There we go. Blending requires patience, multiple strokes, and alpha textures. I cannot tell you how important alpha textures are. Use them a lot. All right, let's go ahead and clean up some of the mess that we made here. So I'll go ahead and clean up these edges here, make sure that they're kind of green. It's okay if a little bit of brown shows up, but let's not have too much. Okay. Now that's a lot of grass there. Let's continue texturing. For now, I think the path is good. We can add more stuff to it later. Let's throw in some more grass. Right now, the grass seems kind of flat and not very three-dimensional, or doesn't have a lot of dimension to it. So we'll go back into Jungle Tropics, and you'll see this kind of tall grass alpha. This stuff works great. Let's just see what it looks like where it is currently. Ah, there we go. Now we're adding in a little bit more depth to the grass. You notice how the grass just looked really flat, like it was a mowed lawn? But throwing in this alpha grass texture right here now gives it a sense of depth. And that's exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and, where we have those kind of lighter kind of grass texture, let's throw in. Remember what I said, alphas are the way to go. You want to use alpha textures. There we go, perfect. That's good. Let's throw in some in here as well. Perfect. So far, everything's kind of coming well together. I might actually remove the white. I kind of think the brown will work better. At first, I was kind of cool with it, but now that I kind of look at it, I kind of feel like, I think it might do better in the brown color. So let's bring the brightness down, and I'll go ahead and take these as well. I thought a ghost snag might work well, but now I'm kind of having second thoughts. Okay, there we go. Perfect. And then these roots are kind of a different color, so we'll boost the saturation up and change the hue a little bit and bring the brightness down. There we go. Yeah, I see, I kind of like the brown a little better. At first, I thought the ghost snag might look good, but I kind of feel that the brown suits in. The white was just a little too much. All right, that looks good. Okay, and we've added in those alphas. Let's save. We've got 139. Yep, it is much better just being the brown, like wood, instead of the white ghost snag. But it was worth the try, right? And it's all trial and error. That's what it is. Oh yeah, we'll probably add more stuff obstructing the path. And we'll definitely add in the stones as well to show that it was a dried up riverbed. I'll probably remove some of the rock shelves that are in there, those little cliffs, because I want to have maybe where there's a flatter spot where there isn't as many cliffs, we can put down some rock. Yep, absolutely. Mimics, absolutely. You just don't know until you try. Okay. All right, perfect. So we're getting close to the shadowing part. Let's just continue adding just a little bit more stuff here. What we have is a lot of open space right here, and it might be nice to put some things in there that your player can interact with in combat, and that could be stumps, it could be maybe some rocks, it could be roots sticking out of the ground, it could be maybe a more human structure, like maybe we want to have maybe some ruins that are kind of attached in here somewhere. So let's do that. I think that would be good. Remember when I mentioned contrast between what's built and what's naturally created or naturally formed? Throwing in ruins, and it doesn't have to be much. It doesn't have to be this complex ruin system. It could just be the corner of a building. And that's it. It could just be a corner of a ruined building. I can't tell you how much that will be just enough. So let's go to the path. We'll put in some wall here, and we might want to consider maybe a jungle ruin, overgrown ancient slope. Let me see here. There might be some ruined jungle walls in here. Let's see here. Let's see, a broken aqueduct. And then there's a broken one here. Let's see, what's this one? You know, I kind of like this broken aqueduct wall. Let's just see what it looks like first. I might want to boost the scale up a little bit. Let's take a look. Oh, no hablo español. Okay, let's just take a look here. Bring the scale up more. I'm just attaching it to see what it looks like. I think that looks okay. Now that I've kind of set that up, let's go ahead and create the ruin part. And what I'll do is I'll kind of have it kind of go to here. And we'll kind of create this kind of L shape. And what we'll do is we'll end up ruining it a little bit more. So we'll have this little shape right here. We'll go into here, and I'll go ahead and make little openings to break up the ruin pieces. And then right where that ruin is, you do need to put a texture to kind of show that there was a floor besides just grass. And the way that you want to show that time has passed is to show more grass than stone floor underneath it. We should probably stick to the similar stone that we used over here. We'll just kind of put it right where the ruin part is. We're not going to do too much blending yet, but we will. There we go. So it looks like it's been over a little bit, and then let's also create a little path that kind of leads over to here, like that. Okay. And then players can walk up that, and we can either put like a ramp, we can take a clipping mask, put it on top of it like that. There's all different ways to do it. In fact, let's do that clipping mask thing. That's pretty cool. Check this out. We can go click the shape tool. We can go to turn the stroke off, turn merge shape off, and then choose the fill to be the clipping mask. And then you can just kind of put this over here, and then you can paint on top of that. Or you can just use stairs, or you can make it a low ledge where players can just walk on top of. A lot of different ways that you can kind of go about doing it. I kind of like the idea of players having to walk up it. I think that looks kind of nice. Let's also throw in just a little bit of stone on the path a little bit so that players kind of get the idea like, oh, hey, this is different from the other part of the path. One thing you really need to do is that unless you make something, if you hide something too well and it becomes too hard to find, players will get bored and they'll stop looking for it. So you do need to make sure that when you're trying to indicate to a player to go to a certain place, you need to make indicators on the map to point them in that direction. So you notice that the path, there's no stone except for that stone right there. That right there will kind of indicate that, hey, maybe this is different. Maybe I should go there. Okay. That will be kind of helpful there. I'm also going to throw in some vegetation to overlap these walls right here. I think that would be a nice touch. Let's go ahead and throw in a different type of plant this time. We'll go back into the jungle tropics. Let's use a different plant. This kind of bright green. I kind of like that. Let's use that. Let's just place a couple just over here. In fact, yeah, that looks good. We're going to place just a couple in here. There we go. Adding in some vegetation. All right, that looks good. The way that you, someone asked about ratio, it's just that you should set scale kind of right away in the beginning by just using the grid and then scale something to that, to be that size, and keep that grid at that scale. And then when you're kind of making the map, as you go back to the grid, turn it back on, look, and make sure that things are scaled. So it's always best to kind of set a scale right away, because what happens was that if you start out a map without using scale, then it will be all over the place, and then you have to go select everything and rescale it again to fit to the scale. So really the first step in any map is just to set the scale right away and just use the grid for that. Okay. I think we're getting very close to the point now where we can start putting in some shadows. Let's go ahead and do that, what people were asking about, throwing in the riverbed part. So this could have been like an old creek. So I'm going to leave one spot of it kind of open where there's not a lot of space. And we're going to throw in some pebbles. And, I think a really good texture for this is in the one of the Eastern packs. And it's like this mosaic one. Let me see if I can find it. Is this it? Mosaic? Yeah, these look pretty good to me. These might work. I might end up bringing the brightness down a little bit and bringing the contrast up. Let's bring the brightness down. Let me see how big they are. Oh yeah, they're small, pebble-like. That's perfect. Let's do that. Let's also bring the contrast up a little bit. And I'm going to just paint a little bit. What I'll do is I'll bring the saturation or transparency down. I'm having a rough day today. Let's go ahead and just place it here so I can get a look at it. There we go. Yeah. Okay, cool. Now it looks like little stones. That's perfect. Great. Adding that there. Usually when you're trying to decide the scale, the first stamp that you put down will be the stamp that you use to scale every other stamp against. Just kind of remember that. I think I need to bring the brightness down even more. Let's go over it again. No, let's bring it down even more. I don't know if it needs to be that dark, but I think that having it a little bit darker in some areas will look nice. There we go. Put some over here as well. Okay, yeah, that's that dry part that people were talking about. 192 changes. Whoo, boy, does that take up a lot of changes, doesn't it? Okay, let's go ahead and save. And now we're going to get on to the choosing where the light sources are. Where are we at for time here? 45? Ooh, yeah, we got to move on here. So let's get started. Let's add filters. Let's start texturing or start adding in the shadows and everything. Whew, it's a lot to do here. Okay, let's throw in just some filters to kind of get a feel for where I want everything. I think a night filter is a good start because it's nighttime. That's usually what you do at a campsite is you stay the night there. We'll make sure it's layer 4 because I want a light source to be on top. So I'll type in light. Try to wrap this up quick. Okay, let's use a orangish color first. Remember layer 5. We'll use an orange color to kind of make it to where it has that flame, nice flame color to it. And then we'll put in a lighter color one. And then we'll put that on top of that. Okay. So there's our light source for that. So now we know where we're going to be putting shadows over there. That works out perfect. Let's go ahead and also add in a vignette. Okay. Let's go ahead and put that in there. What this will do is kind of darken out the edges and it will put more focus into the center of the map. And that's perfect for this because the centerpiece of the map is the campsite where that campfire is. It's the lightest contrast is the lightest light against the darkest dark. Yes, stacking light sources is really, really helpful. And play with blend modes too. You get some really interesting results, really interesting effects when you do it that way. Okay, let's go ahead and throw in now some, let's throw in maybe some reds. Put in like a little red sky. Might be a good idea. See, right now it's just all kind of green, so red should kind of, adding a little bit of this red sky will kind of cause the fire color to pop out more. You notice that the campfire, watch what happens when I add that red to it. It starts to kind of pop out a little bit more, and it adds a little bit more red to it. And there's a lot of browns and greens there, and that red is going to boost that a little bit more. So I think that's a nice touch to it. Now, let's get to where is the light source, and how do I do the shading? When you're doing shadows, you can use paths, or you can use the top layer. Now, paths can be kind of intensive for shadowing. So if you have a lower end machine, I don't use the line tool with the color that I want and then the blur and a blend mode. So I'll use the top layer to kind of avoid that. Top layer is not as kind of as intensive on the device. And I've got these filters running. Now, when you're deciding what shadows color to use, really it's going to be the dominant color in the map. And the kind of two dominant colors on the map are green and brown. Okay, so let's use green and brown as the colors we're going to use for our shadows. So I'll just choose a green, and then I'll bring it all the way to the right and then bring it down. And we're going to get this nice, dark, dark, dark green. Okay, top. And the great thing about Inkarnate is there's like 1,000,001 ways, 100 different ways to do shadows. You can use the shape tool, the line tool, you can use the top layer. There's so many different methods in which that you can use to do it. So just pick the one that works best for you. So the first thing that I think where shadows would be is that it would be on the outside here, where this stump is. I want to show that the stump goes higher up in the air, and so the shadowing should be a little bit around the edge there. So let's go ahead and put this dark kind of shadowing around the stump to show that there's this level of depth. I think that's a good start. And then we can also use a brown color as well. That way we can kind of mix it in there. So let's go ahead and just bring the size down here and just put this kind of brownish color right along this edge here and allow that to pop out. I think that looks good. This nice brown color. Let's do this one as well. Let's add in a shadow to show that there is a shadow underneath the stump, under this tree right here, to show that it's up. Same thing with this one. And we want to show that this thing is higher up. So let's go ahead and add a little bit of shadow underneath it. Add in shadow here. Let's go add shadows inside as well. All right, where should we add the shadows? Emanating from the light, away from the light source. So let's go ahead and throw in a shadow right here. And I'm using that brown color. Add in a shadow here. Auto shadow here. And here. Makes sense. Let's add in some shadows all within the stump as well. So all along here, I want to put some shadows along this ledge, this edge here. There we go. Awesome. Yeah, add in those shadows along that edge there. You can even use an object shadow if you wanted to show even more differential, which we'll end up doing, by the way. We will end up doing that just to show that there's some more depth there. So we'll go ahead and add that along here and also along here. There we go. A lot of brush strokes. That's just the way that it goes. Okay, let's take a step back and see how our shadowing looks. Already the campsite is beginning to pop out with those dark shadows in there. I'm happy with that. That looks good. Let's go ahead and select that hollowed out tree and let's add in a custom object shadow. We're going to center the shadow because I'm just creating the ambient occlusion. That's just going to be that dark shadow that's going to cause it to pop out. So I'll boost the intensity so I can see how bright it is, and I'll change the blur size. And this is going to give it that really dark shadow along that edge there. Now you really noticed how much that part now pops out really, really well. So that looks nice. Okay, let's continue adding more shadows in. So if there is a lot of foliage, if the canopy is really thick, then there's not going to be a lot of moonlight that's going to be coming in. But you could throw down a desaturated light source if you wanted to show moonlight. One thing I notice about moonlight is it's not like sunlight. It doesn't have this warm color to it. So if you desaturate it, it becomes this white color, right? It becomes this whiter color. And so this is a great way to show moonlight, is by desaturating it and just kind of place it where you want to show there's a opening in the canopy. So if I put a light here, it looks like there's an opening in the canopy there. We could put a light right here to make it look like there's an opening in the canopy there. And we can put a light source maybe on top of this stump right here to make it look like there's some natural lighting coming down to the trees there. So to create openings to show various light sources, you can do that. And then from there, now that you have the light source, you can now paint in the shadows. So green is that dominant color. So what we'll do is if the light source is right here, then we want to have the shadows going outside of it, like this. And let's go ahead and create a little bit of shadow here to make it look like there's a little bit of ambient occlusion there. Just a little bit. You don't want to do too much. And let's add a little bit of ambient occlusion along these cliffs as well. Let's say that these ones are just a little bit higher up. These ones are going to be pretty high up. Remember, to show that depth differential, the more shadow. There we go. And then I'll top it off with that brown color right along that edge, just to stick with the continuity of brown and greens for my shadow work. Okay, let's take a step back, take a look at it. Where are we at for time? 73 or 53 minutes? Okay. Let's go ahead and add in the last bit of stuff that we might want to throw in, which I think would be the last little details. Let me show you some really cool like lighting tricks that you can do. You can paint on the top layer to create your highlights. So this is more of an artist thing than it is a functionality thing, but this can take you a long way when you throw on a little bit of light onto edges, onto this left here, my bad, right there, where there's light coming onto that edge there, light right here, light reflecting off of here, light reflecting off of here, off of the guitar. These little tiny details right here can kind of take it a little bit further. You can also use the path with a line tool for this. So it's okay if you don't decide to use that. But just throw in this little light color along these edges here, again, to create these highlights. And it's just a nice little touch to give it a little bit more depth. It really adds to that ambience there by just throwing in just a little bit. I think it looks kind of nice. There we go. You have those nice little shadows in there. All right, let's throw in the last bit of details. We're going to throw in some roots. Because one thing that I've noticed is that um, there isn't a whole lot overlapping the trail, but in real life, things fall down, leaves, things grow over the trail. All of that stuff happens without some kind of maintenance from people. So what we do is we look up vines, and there's some really nice little vines right here that you can use. I think these work great. Let's put them down a layer. I'm also going to make it to where I'm going to change the hue to where they're more green and bring the brightness down. And I'll place one down just to see how it looks. Yeah, I like that where it is. Let's throw a vine going in there. In fact, we're just going to use this particular vine the whole time. We'll turn that random stuff off. We don't need that for now. Let's go ahead and put one right there on the path. Let's put one kind of going over here. Another one looking good would be right there. Another one right there. And then one more right here. That looks good. There we go. So now you have these nice vines kind of going over the path there. Where are we at for time? Okay, I think so far this kind of overall kind of shows where things are. The last bit of blending that I would recommend is twigs and sticks. So if you type in twigs, it's like twigs and stones. This is a great texture to use. It's an alpha. Recommend just bringing the brightness down on it. And then we might want to change the texture scale of it. I want it to be around the same brownish color as the wood. So I'll go and put that down. And you would put the twigs and stuff wherever you see trees. So there's a tree right here that fell down. So add some twigs and rocks here. Let's add some twigs and rocks here. Let's even put some inside of here. And in fact, I'll kind of put a little bit more dirt. We didn't really blend inside of here. So let's put a little bit of dirt inside of here. Put some along this edge here. That way we kind of blend in more. Because right now it just that flat. There wasn't a lot of blending. There we go. That looks much, much, much better. And then we can even put some dirt, mix it in with some of the rock here. There we go. Much better. Awesome. Okay. All right. Last filter is going to be your color adjustment filters. Just click this. And what I always do is I just love to boost up the saturation. So really get that saturation up. So really get this nice bright color. I really like that. You can use contrast to kind of make it darker, or if you want to fade it out more, you can. Sometimes I'll add just a little bit of contrast, maybe 4 or 5. And don't have the saturation be too crazy, but you can have boost the saturation up a little bit, and that will really get that color to pop out. I love using the color adjustment filter and just kind of boosting that up. If you feel it needs to be darker, you can change the brightness down. If you feel it needs to be brighter, you can bring it up. So you have those choices there. And the last little detail I want to throw in is maybe a trap, because I do feel that traps are kind of important, because what's going to happen in this combat is that you do want to have some kind of traps lying around somewhere for your enemies that are trying to maybe get to the camp, or you're trying to get to the camp. So a nice little trap is you can put one of those traps right here. And that way there's only a secret way to get in. Maybe they have to climb on top of the stumps to get inside of it. Maybe you want to put one here right where the path starts. You can put one right there, and only those who know about the camp. You can put 2 there if you want, always throwing in some environmental interaction for your players to deal with. Combat can be kind of boring if you have it just hack and slash back and forth. Throwing in things that your players can interact with in the environment are super, super important. So just throwing down some simple traps like these is just a great way to throw in more interaction with your camp. Okay, well, I think overall this looks good. We could do another camp stream in the future if you wanted to. We could put that on the edge of a waterfall. We can put a regular campsite that's just in the woods somewhere in a clearing. There's all these different things that we could do. There's so many possibilities when it comes to streams. So definitely share your ideas with me if you have them. Okay, all right. Well, that is it. I think the next stream is next Monday. It's a masterclass stream. And that is going to be, I believe that is going to be a jobs listing board. And I'm super excited about that, because just like camps, campsites, camp encounter maps, the job listing boards are pretty stock. Players are going to go to different towns and they're going to look for the job listings to find out, to fulfill quests, ale drinking contests, whatever it might be. All right. And I'll make sure that this map is clonable. If people like this map, they want to add to it, they want to use it, I'll make sure that they can clone and edit this. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thanks for bearing with me today. I'm a little odd today, but I feel like I did what I could. Thanks, Mimics. I appreciate you. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Have a great day, okay? Auf Wiedersehen.